I have 19 years in this work, and in that time I have learned that the most frightening thing in a search and rescue file is never the weather and never the terrain. It is a blank space where a signature should be. So I want to start with the thing I cannot explain, and then I want to walk it back to the beginning and show you how I got there, the way I would walk anyone through a case file. There is a trailhead sign in Log at the top of a ridge in our county. It is an ordinary thing, a weatherproof box bolted to a post, a binder inside, a pen on a string. Hikers write their name, the date, the time they start, and a phone number for someone who would want to know if they didn't come back. When they return, they sign out. That is the whole system. It is older than the GPS, older than the radios, older than me. It costs nothing, it depends on nothing, and on a mountain where the cell signal dies a quarter mile up the loop, it is sometimes the only record that a person was ever there at all. The last entry in that log is in my handwriting. It is my name, my emergency contact number, the one my wife has carried for 20 years, and the date next to it is tomorrow. I have not written it. Let me back up. Let me do this properly, because the only way I know how to make sense of anything is to lay it out the way we lay out an incident, in order with the records, because the records are supposed to be the part you can trust. I work wilderness response for the county. Search and rescue mostly, though the title covers a lot. When somebody doesn't come off a mountain, I am one of the people who goes looking, and I am the person who documents the looking. I run the incident paperwork. I plot the search grids. I review the GPS tracks the field teams bring back. I log the radio traffic. I check the trailhead boxes. When a case closes, one way or another, I am the one who writes the closure note that goes into the county system and the ranger station archive. It is not the job people imagine. The television version is all helicopters and dramatic carries down a cliff face. The real version is paperwork and weather windows, and standing in a gravel lot at 4 in the morning waiting for enough light to put teams on the trail. It is setting up the staging area out of the back of a truck, a folding table and a couple of map boards and a coffee urn that somebody's wife donated a decade ago. It is dividing a ridge into search segments and handing each segment to a team of volunteers, most of whom took the day off work without pay to be there. It is calling a family back to tell them we found nothing today and we will try again tomorrow. It is grid math. It is keeping the radio log clean so that if a lawyer ever reads it, every decision we made looks like the decision a reasonable person would have made with the information we had. I am careful with facts. I have to be. A sloppy SAR report can put a volunteer in the wrong drainage in the dark, or leave a family without answers, or end up in a courtroom. So when I tell you something strange, understand that my instinct, my training, my whole nature is to find the boring explanation first and hold onto it as long as I possibly can. I held onto the boring explanations a long time, longer than I should have. The trail system this happens on is an old one, a ridge network on the eastern side of the county, a main loop with several spurs, some maintained and some not. The terrain up there is unkind in the specific way Appalachian terrain is unkind. It is not the dramatic vertical of out west. It is steep, folded, choked with laurel, full of small drainages that all look the same and all lead somewhere you don't want to be. A person who steps off the trail 30 feet to relieve themselves can lose the trail entirely, Because the laurel closes behind you like water and the slope pulls you down, and every direction looks like the one you came from. People hike it year-round. Most of them come back. The ones who don't are usually exactly what you'd expect. They twist an ankle 2 miles in and can't walk out. They take a spur they shouldn't have in failing light. They underestimate how fast the weather turns up there because it turns fast, faster than the valley, and a clear afternoon becomes a whiteout ridge in under an hour. That is the normal shape of a missing hiker case. It is sad and it is human, and there is nothing strange about it. The first one I want to tell you about fit that shape perfectly. It was October 2 years ago. A man in his 30s experienced solo day hiking the main loop. His name is in the file, and I am not going to read it because of where this ends and because his family has been through enough. I will call him the first hiker. The call came in to dispatch a little after 9 in the evening. His sister. She was not hysterical, which I remember, because the ones who aren't hysterical are often the ones who are most afraid. She gave us his name, his age, his vehicle, the trail she thought he'd gone to, and the fact that he always texted her when he was off the mountain and back in cell range, and that he had not. She gave us a description down to the color of his pack. She had the kind of details you only have about a person you love and pay attention to. Dispatch took it, flagged it as an overdue hiker, and it landed on my desk first thing the next morning. He signed in at the trailhead at 8:42 in the morning. I have the log entry, clean handwriting, the date, the time, an emergency contact number that we later confirmed was his sister's. He started up the loop. He never signed out. We opened an incident the next morning and ran the standard initial response. The first thing you do before you commit a single searcher to the field is confirm the person is actually out there. People get found in their own kitchens. They get found at a girlfriend's apartment they forgot to mention. So we sent a deputy to the trailhead at first light and he called it in. One vehicle in the lot matching the sister's description, plate confirmed, locked, cold to the touch, dew on the windshield which told us it had sat overnight. Then I had him open the box and read me the log over the radio, and there it was. The name going in at 8:42. No corresponding sign out anywhere on the page. That is the moment a missing hiker case becomes real, not the phone call. The phone call is worry. The moment is when you stand at the box and see the name going in and not coming out and the car cold in the lot, and you understand that the mountain has someone. After that, it is a clock. Survivability in those temperatures for a man who might be injured and immobile is measured in days, and the days are not many. We stood up a full operation. I set the staging area in the gravel lot, ran the command post out of the truck, and started checking in volunteer teams as they arrived. We had good turnout. We always do for the first day. I broke the search area into segments, assigned each team a segment and a priority, briefed them on the subject and the terrain, set the radio frequencies and the check-in schedule, and pushed them up the trail in pairs and threes as the light came. The first day you run the main loop and the maintained spurs, and you run them fast and wide, because on the first day the odds are best, and the person, if they are alive, is most likely to be near the trail and able to respond to a shout or a whistle. We ran the grid outward from his last known point, which was the trailhead, because that was the only fixed location we had. Teams checked in on schedule every 30 minutes, segment by segment. A clean radio log building up at the command post. Team 2 clearing the lower loop, negative. Team 4 at the spur junction, negative. Team 1 to the first drainage, negative. The sister came up to the command post that first afternoon. I want to be careful here because grief is not a performance and I will not narrate hers as one. She did not wail. She sat in a camp chair somebody found for her near the truck but out of the way with a thermos she never opened, and she watched the trail. Every time a team came down, she stood up. Every time it was not him, she sat back down. She thanked us each time for trying. That is the part that stays with you. They thank you while you are failing them. We searched for 6 days. We had good weather for 4 of them. We ran the main loop, we ran the maintained spurs, we ran the drainages a disoriented person tends to follow downhill. We brought in dogs. We flew the ridge when we could get the aircraft and the ceiling allowed it. The teams came off the mountain a little more wrecked each evening, the way field teams do on a multi-day search, the fatigue stacking up, the briefings getting quieter, the volunteers running on adrenaline and obligation by the 5th day. We found nothing. No gear, no tracks we could confirm, no sign. After 6 days, with no new information and no survivable timeline left for the conditions, we scaled back to a limited continuous search and the case went quiet. That happens. Not often, but it happens. The mountains keep some people. Every SAR worker in this country has cases that never close the way you want them to. I made the call to the sister myself. She said she understood. She thanked me again. Here is where it stopped being normal. 2 days after we scaled back, a volunteer doing a routine trailhead check brought the sign and binder down to the station because the box latch was loose and water had gotten in and we wanted to dry the pages out before they molded. I was going through it, page by page, the way I do, and I found a new entry. The first hiker's name, dated 2 days prior, a start time in the morning. The same emergency contact number, his sister's, written out in full. No sign out. 8 days after he went missing, the man had signed in at the trailhead again. My first thought was the only thought a sane person has. Somebody copied it. A family member, maybe, or a friend, came up to the trailhead in grief, the way people do, to be where the person last was, and wrote the name. People leave flowers at trailheads. People leave notes and trinkets and little laminated photographs zip-tied to the post. Writing his name in the log would be a strange thing to do, but grief makes people do strange things. And a strange but human explanation is still a human explanation. So I called the sister. Gently. I asked if anyone in the family had been up to the trailhead recently. She said no. She said she couldn't bring herself to go up there. I believed her. You learn to hear the difference between a person who is hiding something and a person who is just broken, and she was just broken. So I moved to the next boring explanation. A loose page. These binders are old. Pages come free of the rings, get reinserted out of order. An old entry from a previous year ends up mixed into the current section and somebody reads it as new. I checked the page. It was the current sheet, current date block, in sequence with the entries above and below it, all of which were genuine hikers we could account for. It was not a loose page from another time. It was written in its proper place in the proper order on the proper day. A prank, then. Somebody local who'd heard about the case thinking it was funny. But the handwriting stopped that one cold. I had the original sign in from October right there. I laid them side by side. They matched. Not the way a copy matches, where someone traces or imitates and you can see the careful, deliberate strokes. They matched the way two signatures from the same person on different days match. Same slant, same pressure, same little habits in the letters, but loose, natural, written at speed by a hand that wasn't thinking about it. The second entry was, if anything, a little more tired looking than the first, like the same man on a worse day. I considered the scan. Sometimes ink bleeds through a page or a bad photocopy doubles an entry. But this was the original binder in my hands, not a scan. Wet paper, real ink, pressed into the page hard enough to feel the grooves on the back. There was no boring explanation left that survived contact with the physical log. I want to be honest about what I did with that. I did almost nothing. I made a note in my own working file, not the official narrative. I wrote, duplicate trailhead entry, post-incident, handwriting consistent, no rational source identified. And then I closed the binder and went back to the 40 other things on my desk because the case was scaled back, because there was no body and no lawsuit and no family asking questions, and because there was no box on any of our forms for what I had just seen. If it had stopped there, I could have lived with it as a thing I never explained. It did not stop there. The second case was 4 months later, February. A woman, late 20s, experienced winter hiker, went up the same trail system on a clear, cold morning. Signed in at 7:15. Good gear by all accounts, the kind of person who carries microspikes and a real shell and knows how to layer. The weather log shows the front came through faster than forecast, the way it does up there, the temperature falling off a cliff and the wind coming up, and by early afternoon the ridge was in a whiteout. She never signed out. Her partner called it in that evening. We ran it hard, but a winter search is a different animal, and everyone on the team knows it from the first briefing. The timeline is shorter. Exposure that a person survives for days in October will take them in hours in February. The terrain that is merely difficult in good weather becomes genuinely dangerous. The rock slick, the laurel loaded with snow, the drainages full of ice, and you have to weigh every team you send up against the risk of creating a second casualty. So we searched in the weather windows. We'd get a few hours where the wind dropped and the visibility opened, and we'd push teams hard and fast through a segment, then pull them back when the next band came through, and the ridge closed up white again. Radio discipline matters more in those conditions than any other. You keep the channel clear. You keep check-ins tight and on schedule. You account for every person every cycle. Because if a team goes quiet in a whiteout, you have minutes, not hours, to know about it. I ran comms on most of it, and I kept that log clean to the second. We found her start point at the trailhead, her car, her sign in, the lot half drifted over. We never found her. And 6 days after she disappeared, a new entry appeared in the trailhead log. Her name, her handwriting matched against the February sign in. Her emergency contact number, her partner's, correct to the digit. A morning start time. No sign out. 2 cases now. The same pattern exactly. Sign in, vanish. Then sign in again after the search has already begun, with the right hand and the right number, and never sign out. That was when I stopped treating it as a curiosity and started treating it as a case in its own right, which meant I did what I do, which is go through every record we have and see whether the records agree with each other or argue. I expected them to argue. I expected the trailhead log to be the one crazy document and everything else to be sane. That is not what I found. What I found, slowly, over weeks, was that the records were starting to agree with the log. I went back to the incident files for both cases and reread the field team check-in records. The timestamp notes teams radio in as they clear sections of trail. For the first hiker, on the date of that impossible second sign-in, a team had been on the lower loop doing a limited continuous sweep. One of the check-ins, logged at mid-morning, noted fresh boot prints crossing the maintained trail and heading up a spur, prints they followed a short way and lost on rock. At the time, we'd assumed another hiker, an unregistered one, which is common. Reading it again, with the second sign in front of me, the timestamp on those prints lined up almost exactly with the start time written in the log. I pulled the weather logs to see whether the prints could have been older, preserved and exposed by melt. They couldn't. The ground conditions that morning meant those prints were fresh, made within a couple of hours of being found. Somebody had walked up that spur that morning, and the only person the log says was at the trailhead that morning was a man who had been missing for 8 days. I pulled the GPS track exports next. Every field team carries a unit that logs a breadcrumb track, and I keep the exports attached to each incident so we can prove what ground we covered. I overlaid the track from that morning's team against the boot print note and the spur. The team's own track turned back at the rock where they lost the prints, but the prints, by the field notes, had continued up the spur past where the track stopped. We had a record of where our people went and a record of where the prints went, and the prints went somewhere our people did not, on a morning when no living hiker was logged on that mountain. I pulled the trail camera records. We have a couple of cameras on that system, motion triggered, mostly there for wildlife studies and the occasional question about illegal use. The cameras are not on the trailhead itself, they're up on the loop. For the first case, the camera nearest the spur had a gap. Not a malfunction gap, the timestamps run continuous, but a stretch of frames on that morning where the camera triggered and recorded only the empty trail, motion detected, nothing in frame. The system logs a motion event, but the image shows bare ground. That can happen with wind-moving brush. It happened on that camera repeatedly across the same window the boot prints were laid down. I told myself wind. I wrote wind in my notes. I did not believe wind, but I wrote it because the alternative was not a thing you write. Then there was the radio call. This is the one I have the hardest time with because I did not read it in a file. I heard it. It was during the limited continuous phase on the second case, the winter hiker. I was at the station running comms while a small team worked the lower trail. Mid-afternoon, light already going gray. The radio traffic had been routine, teams checking in on the cycle, nothing moving. And then there was a transmission on our working channel that did not come from any of our teams. It was faint, broken up, the way a signal is when it's at the edge of range or coming through bad terrain. A woman's voice. She gave a name, her name. The winter hiker's name, clearly enough that I wrote it down before I understood what I was hearing. And she said she was back at the trailhead. I keyed up and asked her to repeat and confirm her location. The team lead, who was standing in the trailhead lot at that exact moment, keyed up at the same time and said the lot was empty. His vehicle and the missing woman's vehicle, still where it had sat for a week, and no one else. No person at the trailhead. No one at the box. He could see the whole lot and the sign in board from where he stood. There was no further transmission. I have the radio log. The call is in it, logged at the time, with the name as I heard it, because logging it was reflex before sense caught up. Our own transcript carries a transmission from a missing person reporting herself at a trailhead that a field team was physically looking at and finding empty. I sat with that recording a long time afterward. There is hiss and terrain break up, and under it a voice that gave a name I knew. I have listened to it more times than is good for me. I cannot make it not be her voice, and I cannot make it be anyone who could have been there. After the radio call, I went into the ranger station archive. The old files, paper mostly, going back decades, the cases from before everything was digital, kept in gray boxes on steel shelves in a back room that smells like old toner and mouse. I was not looking for anything specific. I was looking for company. I wanted to find out whether anyone before me had ever seen this and written it down. They had, not in the narratives. The narratives were always clean, but in the trailhead logs preserved with the old cases, and in the closure notes, the pattern was there if you knew its shape. I went through everything that back room held on that trail system. Old emergency contact sheets, the next of kin written in fountain pen on forms the county hasn't used since the 70s. Old weather logs kept by hand, and closure notes, decades of them. I even found old closure notices for the trail itself, seasonal shutdowns, a stretch in one bad year where the ridge was closed to the public entirely, and the note giving the reason was vague in a way that the rest of the file was not. Old missing hiker cases on that same trail system, going back further than I'd been alive. A name signs in, never signs out. Search runs, finds nothing. And then days later in a logbook from that year, the same name signs in again. I found 4 of them across the decades that were unmistakable and a handful more that might have been. The closure notes on every one of them used the same kind of language. Trail record discrepancy. Logbook inconsistency noted. No operational impact. Unverified post-incident entry. No further action. The same bland phrasing, case after case, year after year. A quiet little vocabulary that existed, I realized, specifically so that nobody would ever have to write down what had actually happened. Somebody before me had built a set of words for this. They had been careful, the way I am careful. They had found the safe language and they had used it and they had closed the files and they had, I have to assume, gone home and tried not to think about it. I brought it up the chain, carefully. I did not say what I thought because I did not have a way to say what I thought that wouldn't sound like a man coming apart. I went to a senior coordinator I've worked with for a long time, a sober and decent person, and I laid out the trail log entries, the matching handwriting, the boot prints, the GPS overlay, the radio call, the old cases. I kept it factual. I said we have a recurring pattern of post-incident trailhead entries attributed to missing subjects. The entries are physically present in the logs. The handwriting is consistent, and I don't know how to characterize it in the file. He listened to all of it. He did not look surprised, which is the part that has stayed with me. He looked like a man being told about a leak he already knew about. And when I was done, he told me, kindly, the way you tell someone something for their own good, not to write missing hiker signed in after disappearance in any official narrative. He said it would not survive review. He said it would get the file kicked back, get the case reopened on paper for no operational reason, get the family's hopes raised, and get my judgment questioned in a way that follows a person. He said it does not matter what is true, it matters what can be written, and that cannot be written. He said to use the approved wording, trail log discrepancy, unverified entry, note it, code it, close it. I asked him whether he had ever seen it himself. He didn't answer that. He told me again to use the approved language, and he said it gently, and then he changed the subject to a budget thing, and that was the end of it. So I used the language. I want to be honest about that because I am not a brave man and I will not pretend to be one in a story I'm telling about myself. I wrote trail log discrepancy. I wrote unverified entry. I coded it clean and I closed it, and I added my own small contribution to the careful vocabulary that lets this go unnamed. The way someone before me did, the way someone after me probably will. But I could not leave it alone physically. There is a difference between not writing a thing down and not needing to know it. I needed to know it. So one morning before dawn in the spring, with no case open and no reason to be there, I drove up to the trailhead alone. It is a 40-minute drive and then a short walk in from the gravel lot to where the board and the box are bolted to their posts. I got there before first light. The lot was empty. Mine was the only vehicle. The woods up there at that hour are very quiet. The particular quiet of high ground before the birds start, a silence so complete you can hear the blood in your own ears, and the air was damp and cold and smelled like wet leaves and rock. The box was just where it always is, the latch still loose from 2 winters ago, the metal beaded with dew. I opened the box and took out the binder. It was damp the way it always is, the pages soft and swollen at the edges but intact, the cardboard cover gone furry with moisture. I turned to the current page. There were entries on it that should not have been there, not from that morning, from before. Names I knew. The first hiker, the winter hiker, and 2 of the names from the old archive cases, hikers who went missing years apart. Decades in one instance, all of them written on the same current page, in sequence in their own hands, each with a start time, each with a correct emergency contact number. None of them signed out. A page that should have held a few ordinary entries from the past week held a roster of the missing instead, gathered together out of years that had nothing to do with each other, all writing their names in the same fresh book. And the last entry on the page was still wet. I touched it before I thought, and the ink smeared under my finger, the way fresh ink does, fresh enough to move. The timestamp written beside it was minutes old. Minutes. In a lot where mine was the only vehicle and the only sound was my own breathing, and there was no one on the trail or at the board or anywhere I could see. I looked up from the book at the trail beyond the sign and board. It was the part of the morning where the light was just starting to come up gray through the trees, enough to see the near woods. The forest around the lot was getting lighter. The trail past the board was not. It ran into the trees, and the trees over it stayed dark, darker than the woods to either side, the way a hallway looks when the light in the next room is off. I am not going to tell you that means anything. I am telling you what I saw. The forest was waking up into the gray, and the trail going up the ridge stayed night. I put the binder back in the box. I did not write in it. I closed the latch and I walked back to my car at a pace I am not proud of, and I drove down off the ridge with the heater on too high, and I did not go back. That should have been the end of my part in it. I had decided it would be. I had the records, I had the closure language, I had a senior man telling me to leave it, and I had every reason a practical person has to let a thing he cannot explain stay unexplained. People do it all the time. The archive is full of people who did it. But a few weeks later, doing routine work in the county incident system, I found a new case. It was a missing person incident on that same trail system, opened with an incident number in the system. And it had a trailhead log scan already attached to it. The thing is, no one had called it in. I checked. There was no initiating call in the dispatch record. No family report, no overdue notification, no found vehicle, none of the things that start a case. The case existed in the system before the event that creates a case had happened. And the trail log scan attached to it was a scan of the current page, the page I had held in my own hands a few weeks before, the page with the roster of the missing on it. I scrolled the scan to the bottom to the last entry because by then I knew to look at the last entry. It was my name, my handwriting. I know my own hand. The slant of it, the way I close my A's, the little drop on the tail of the last letter that I have never been able to train out. My name, written in the trailhead log in my own hand, by a hand I am certain was mine and that I am equally certain I never moved. Beside it, my emergency contact number. Not a number anyone would guess. The number my wife has carried since before we were married, the one I have written on 100 forms, the one almost no one else knows in full. And the date next to my entry was the next morning. Tomorrow. A start time in the morning tomorrow in a log I had not signed, for a hike I had not planned, on a ridge I had sworn I would not go back to. No sign out. I went into the SAR archive then, the way you go toward a thing you already know is there. I searched the incident number. There was a report. Mine. An incident report for a missing person, subject named, and the subject was me. It was incomplete, most of the fields still empty, the narrative blank, the search grid unplotted. The way a report looks in the first hours before anyone has done anything. But the closure field was already filled in. Down at the bottom, in the field that is supposed to be the last thing anyone writes, after the search and the grids and the days and the hard call to the family, after all of it, in the field that is only ever filled in at the very end, the words were already there. Trail log discrepancy. Subject did not sign out. No further action. The report for my own disappearance was open and empty, except that it already knew how it ended. I have not gone back to the trailhead. I want that on the record. As I am telling you this, I have not driven up that ridge. I have not opened that box. I have not signed that log. The entry with my name on it is dated for a morning I have not yet lived, and I am sitting here in the valley, not on the mountain, not signing anything. But the case is in the system. The incident number is real. The trail log scan is attached with my hand on it. And the closure note is already written, in the careful language I helped keep careful, the same language someone before me chose so they would never have to say the true thing. The same words I typed myself into a file 4 months ago to make a thing I could not explain go quietly away. I keep going back to the old cases, the ones in the archive, the names that signed in after they were gone. I used to read them as a mystery I might solve. Now I read them as a list I am on. Every one of those people was somebody who signed in and did not come back, and then signed in again days later in their own hand, while someone like me stood at the station and decided what words to put in the file. Somebody is going to find my second entry someday. Days after, in their own routine review, the way I found the others. It will be in my handwriting, and it will have my number, and it will not be signed out. And they will hold the two entries side by side, the real one and the one that comes after, and they will see that they match the way two signatures from the same tired hand on 2 different days match. And then they will do what I did, what the person before me did, what the person before them did, going back further than the records go. They will check the boring explanations first. They will find that none of them hold. They will take it to someone carefully, and someone will tell them kindly not to write down the true thing, and they will use the language. They will type it into my file in the field that is already somehow filled in. Trail record discrepancy. Subject did not sign out. No further action.